Hello, welcome to the Magentleman podcast.
Welcome, everyone. If you're back here for the third time,
Yes,
we appreciate you.
yes, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about productivity. That is the topic. You can see Steve B has a new awesome microphone.
Yes, so I can be more productive.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe.
And I have
uh,
the amazing new background. See?
I, you're just showing off.
No, ridiculous. Slander.
how tough was it to get the certificate?
That was actually really tough. Because back in the day when I got it, like a year ago, there was not a lot of resources. I think maybe Joseph Maxwell had just come out with a study guide, but I didn't have access to it at the time.
Yeah. Joseph Maxwell is your buddy.
Yeah, we go way back. Yeah.
um, anything new with you? Are you planning on getting a fancy mic also?
I am. Yes, I am planning on getting a fancy mic. I'm thinking of getting a standing one that sits on my desk. But actually, yours is temptingly cool.
Well, it's kind of like um so the thing that hooks to the desk, like my desk has like a lip, right? And this thing's not designed for that, so I kind of have like a piece of wood on top of my desk. It's kind of like rigged right now.
Oh
I'm gonna
wow,
figure it out, but I really wanted to use it for the podcast today, so I made it work.
it looks legit. It's almost like we have a third, character on the podcast now. You're Mike.
Yeah. It's taking up all the shine. Like I'm like secondary to the mic now.
Ah,
It's like I should just leave the mic here. The mic can do the podcast itself.
yeah, me and the mic.
um, but yeah, today's topic is productivity. Do you feel you had a productive week?
Yeah, so this week for me was a little different because I took a couple of days off. So I took off, well, I guess just Friday and Monday. But what that means for me is basically I had to crunch my work into 4 days.
Yeah,
It's not like there weren't deadlines or the work doesn't need to get done.
yeah,
So I had
yeah.
to.
I mean, 4 days, but you said you took off Monday and Friday.
Yeah, I just meant for the week where I took Friday off last weekend.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, right? You got to experience the 4-day work week like we talked about. Was it
Yeah,
fun?
no.
No, it wasn't.
It's hardcore, man. Because I mean, guys, you probably know I already have a ton of stuff happening every day. So
Exactly.
trying to squeeze that down and kind of figure out how are we going to accomplish the things we need to without me here for a day. It's a fun exercise, I guess, to a degree, but
Yeah.
nerve wracking. How about you?
Yeah, I actually took a day off this week, Wednesday. Um it was interesting. I mean, when I came back on Thursday, I had a whole bunch of emails I had to catch up on, which wasn't fun. Um So, I mean, other than Wednesday, oh, and I ended up having to do some work at home on Wednesday anyway, right? Because things happened. You know how it is.
Oh yeah,
Um, so pretty productive week. Um, and yeah, not a fan of the 4-day work week, as you said. It just like snowballs the next day, and you're just like trying to catch up, or rather just work my 5 days. Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
yeah.
So
Um, yeah.
no, you're good. I was gonna say we could roll into the topic unless you
Yeah.
have more
So,
banter to hit.
I
I'm
mean, what?
always down with more banter. Don't get me wrong on that.
Oh no, well, I think we can roll into the topic at this point.
Okay,
Um,
let's roll.
so I mean, when do you think, like, what do you think allows you to be the most productive? And then I guess when do you find yourself being the least productive?
Yeah. Okay. So before I answer that question, let me set it up this way, like, because I feel like there's a couple of avenues here, like of like there's setting yourself up to be productive.
Yeah,
There's you know, what is how are you going to measure your whether or not you were productive?
yeah,
And then there's also like just the kind of like theory of um, productivity as applied to like computer science or programming versus actually, Magento related productivity tips and tricks, right? So
yeah,
to
yeah.
answer your question, like, how do I? Sorry, what was your question again? Hit me with that.
So I guess, maybe what are the conditions or what are the things that you put in place to, be as productive as possible? And then maybe what are some of the things that kind of get in your way that stop you from being productive, or, you know, like when are some times, or, that you just realize, oh, well, I don't feel like I accomplished much today. And it's like, okay, I can point it to this reason or that reason, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I have a few, but I was just curious. I
I
mean, I
mean,
can touch on both points, but I was just curious.
I think probably for sure, like on the first part of your question of like how to set yourself up to be productive,
Yeah,
just generally speaking, like planning. It's hard to go into a task or a series of tasks, like a whole project. If you haven't planned well, then you're probably not going to be too productive because you're kind of going to bounce in between things and not really make a ton of progress the way you're hoping to without like sitting down ahead of time and planning. And then there's obviously things like just as a human being, like get a good night's sleep. If you're not having 6 to 10 hours somewhere in there, well, for me, I know if I give my brain between 6 and 10 hours of sleep, it gives me back a productive day of programming. I don't know how you feel about that one.
yeah. Well, no, I definitely get it. Not sleeping can definitely take a toll because the next day maybe if you didn't sleep much, like you're just like dozing off in front of like just your computer screen, which sucks. Uh, I mean, yeah. So on my end, I mean, I sleep is definitely important. Um, but how do I like get into a groove besides obviously planning, as you pointed out, right? And maybe doing some research on my tickets ahead of time, because a lot of times you sit down and you look at a ticket or a feature and then you realize, wait, necessarily I don't understand what they're asking here, or some details are missing. And I guess it's a matter of, do you um, count that research process or um, that requirements gathering process a part of productivity, or are you counting just the coding as just when you actually start implementing a feature, right? Um, but let's say you don't count that requirements gathering portion, and it's more of like, when do I actually start to solve the problem or implement the feature? um you know if you don't plan ahead, or if you don't, if you just assume, yeah, I'm just going to jump into this ticket, you might find yourself actually having to jump on phone calls or setting up meetings with people, and you just have to push that ticket until later, until you can get a response, right?
Yeah,
um
I mean, so you're touching on something though, and I don't mean to cut you off, but like,
yeah,
there is a difference in my mind between a bug and a feature, right?
yeah,
Like as far as being productive and what that means. Um, so we might want to get into that a little bit too.
yeah. And then the other thing is, like, for me, it's like, once I let's say I find that I know what the bug, like I have the requirements fleshed out in my head. You know, in order for me to like really get into the zone, I gotta put on some relaxing music, right? And just kind of zone out. Because like if I'm hearing too much, like if there's too much going on or a lot of interruptions, it's hard for me to really dig into the code and really start solving the problem. Um, so I mean, so that's my first tip, like put on some relaxing music. That's not like if a song has like a lot of lyrics or something like that, maybe not. I'll probably listen to something, maybe some lo-fi hip hop, something like that. That's just like really smooth, and it allows me to like um, get in the zone. Um,
I totally agree, and that was one of the things on my list. But kind of, you know, it depends on the task.
yeah,
So if
yeah. So touch
you,
on that.
yeah, like if I'm doing some task I've done 100 times and I just have to do it, it's just a task of like, you know, for me, like as a front end dev, make this layout.
Yeah.
Literally, I could listen to a podcast. I could listen to Eminem. Like I could listen to as many lyrics or just something occupy my brain, please, because the thing I'm working on, my brain doesn't really need to be involved that much. Now, you know, you will get to the point if you're making the layout or whatever where you're like, wait a second, I need to think about this. So then it's like, okay, push pause or flip over to the lo-fi and let my brain help me here. But
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise, if it's like, I mean, and I guess it could apply to other people's jobs like data entry or just some thing. It's like, okay, I can listen to Joe Rogan or I can.
No, no, I definitely relate to what you're saying, right? If it's a routine task, where maybe you have some documentation there already, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna copy and paste this, or I'm just gonna follow this set of instructions, or maybe you've done it so many times you have the steps memorized. Then there requires, you don't need that level of concentration. You don't need to get into the zone. You can do all sorts of things. But if it is new territory and maybe you need to, I don't know, read some documentation or pay very close
Or do
attention
planning.
to, um yeah, yeah, you kind of have to find a way to get into that zone, um
And I
pretty
like what you
much.
said
I mean,
too.
do you struggle to get, yeah,
I was just gonna say I kill my
go ahead.
notifications. I'll even tell people, hey, you know, I know I'm working remote or whatever, but I'm gonna go notification silent for a while. Like, you know, my phone number if you need to get in touch with me, because that would kill me. Even my phone, um, uh, you know, it's a little. I try not to, as a rule of thumb, allow notifications,
Yeah,
but I do have certain important things like texting. I allow those to appear, uh, and
yeah.
that can throw me off, man. Like I'll get a text about what's going on for dinner or what's happening after work, and it's like I'm very tempted to like get into that conversation when I was 5 levels deep into this problem. Just give me 1 second. I grab water real quick. Aha, I'm back. So yeah, I mean that's great. Music very important. Or I mean, sometimes when I'm working on a problem that's really intense for my brain, I will even turn off everything and try to go quiet mode.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's like that's a severe situation right there.
But I mean, for me, I if I'm working on a problem, I do not answer text messages. Like if I'm answering text messages, I can't get into the zone. Another thing that kills me is emails, or and then just needing, because I feel like I need that kind of block of time to actually code. A lot of my a lot of like me solving problems happens closer to like in the afternoon when there's less meetings, and like my time is not like um cut into like a whole bunch of like 30-minute like blocks, right? Because I mean, it's hard to like start to get really deep into a problem with just 30 minutes to spare. Like I'm just barely thinking and like about the problem and reading, what the issue is.
Yeah,
So
and then you have to reboot when you come back to it, and it's just like, what's even the point? I actually put blocks of like coding time on my calendar.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a meeting like I have with myself.
um, meeting with Steve from 2 to 3.
Do some work. Yeah, exactly.
No. I like that idea. Like if you could just alert your team and let them know, hey, I'm not available from this time to this time because I actually need to like close tickets, right?
But I mean, I do the same thing if I'm in a meeting. I try not to be messing around on Slack. Like, like I try to just pay attention to that meeting while I'm in that meeting. And it kind of leads to another one of my big things is that really multitasking is bad and that there
Yeah,
is no such thing. All you're doing is just not doing the main thing you're trying to do well. You're just distracting yourself. You're looking at other notifications. You're trying to handle this other thing while you're doing this other thing.
yeah,
And it's like if you can, and I always try to, just do things in the order of priority. And yeah, it sounds weird. It's hard to do, but ignore the other things until it's their time to focus on them. And you actually make a lot. I make a lot more progress when I do that.
yeah. I mean, the problem is, right? Priorities change a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just like, well, okay, we're working on this feature that's going to be released, and I don't know, in 2 weeks, and but now there's this production bug, and we have to switch to it like ASAP, right?
Yeah.
That can definitely throw a wrench in. And you're like, oh, this is the high priority ticket. Well, okay, it's not a priority anymore. Focus on this other thing.
Yeah, but it's still like once you switch to the other thing,
Yeah,
you can kind of ignore notifications or
yeah,
I mean, and I'm not saying don't reply to people. I'm just saying
yeah,
like let there be the proper time for that and don't let hurry up a quick get back to people kind of run your day.
yeah. Um, I've definitely like been in that situation where I'm just like, okay, I just responded to a whole bunch of emails, and I don't know, this person's email just came in. That email is going to be ignored for at least an hour, because if not, I'll just be responding to emails all day and never address the issue at hand. So I think we've kind of like identified two major things, right? Emails and meetings.
The
are,
distractions, yeah,
yeah,
and
are the
distraction.
and I mean, but then again, right? It's like the question is, do you classify meetings as productive, right? Because meetings can be a part of the planning process, or maybe the requirements gathering process, right?
Well, I mean, and now I don't want to get too meta on you here, right? But you're asking a question, a kind of like, what is productivity? What do you put into that bin?
Yeah,
And I to answer your question easily or plainly, yeah. I mean, meetings should be productive. If they're not, the Elon Musk rule, then don't be in the room. Or I don't know if that's Bezos, but it's like if you're like allowed to just get up and leave a meeting, right? Because shouldn't have to be to mean you're not needed in or whatever. Um,
yeah,
now, so okay, I don't know if you've heard of this, but like, let's say we define a way to say this is how we're going to measure productivity.
yeah.
Um, now, what happens is when you grab onto that, like let's say it's what's that Scrum term? Uh, Velocity, right?
Velocity.
Have you heard of velocity?
No, I have not heard of velocity.
Yeah, so it's like you assign these story points or whatever to each task, and then as you go through a sprint, you're saying how quickly I can do these things. That's my team's velocity over a certain uh, amount of
Okay.
sprints. You can start determining, you know, my team, when they say a task is a 5, they're going to be able to accomplish that in this. Well, not it's not time, but it's like how quickly or whatever. But the meta kind of point here is anytime you identify any kind of metric and you say that's the thing that I'm trying to improve, that's 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 productivity. That metric right there. Is it how many tasks I do in a day? Is it um, how many projects I get done in a month? Right. Um, Once you've identified that thing and you start focusing on it to try to improve it, you're no longer actually being productive. You're just optimizing this certain metric. And that isn't actual productivity. That is just optimizing for this weird metric that you came up with. Right. So, and this,
Correct.
yeah,
Because it's kind of skewed, right?
yeah, it applies. It's like, it applies in a lot of different fields and areas where you're trying to improve a thing. So you identify, okay, this is the way I'm going to measure whether or not it's been improved. And what you do is you create a kind of an artificial uh, measuring stick that everybody then looks at and tries to improve that specific thing, but you're not actually improving the thing you thought you were improving. you're
Well,
just kind of needling at this weird little point you came up with.
well, yeah. I mean, to give a perfect example of that is, I mean, I can't call a particular company out or you know give any names or anything, but essentially, um, for let's say customer surveys, right? If I've worked at a company before where customer surveys was like the big thing, right? And what would happen was, if a person if a certain employee thought they would get a negative survey, they just wouldn't push the customer to take the survey as much as if they thought the customer loved them, right?
That's a perfect
so
example.
so so yeah,
Or like another example would be if a team is really trying to see how many tasks they can close in a sprint, then it's basically incentivizing your devs to quick close those tasks. Well, just create a different task for that other part of it. Like,
yeah.
so you've increased the number of tasks you're completing, and whoever's looking at that metric to see that that's productivity goes, wow, you guys are so productive. And you're just like, yeah, but I mean, we're doing just a weird thing to make it look that way. Basically, you might not even do it on purpose, right? You're just
Yeah, well, you're maybe, yeah, maybe you're just, I don't know, you're looking out for yourself. You're like, well, usually, I would deal with any subtasks that come up within this particular task within the same ticket. But now that I'm being graded on the number of tickets that I'm closing, there's no way I'm gonna be like, hey man, you need to create a new ticket for that. I don't know. You said you wanted the button to be green at first, and now you wanted blue. We need a new ticket, man.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Oh, so yeah, I'm definitely getting. Your point definitely makes sense. When it comes to that, I mean, how do you think companies gauge productivity though? Do you think they count your meeting time as being productive, or are they strictly looking at, I don't know, lines of code or tickets closed, or they're like, okay, well, I don't think any company is like, well, he had a lot of meetings this month. Um, and that's why we don't have as much tickets closed, and that's okay because he was in meetings, right? They're looking
Yeah.
at it as an unproductive month.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the position. That like, so like you're saying upper management, like how do they kind of view the dev team and
Yeah.
how whether or not it's productive. So I would imagine most companies, there are kind of getting a pull from their different departments, and because the dev team, basically everything at most companies I've worked at that are, I guess maybe even agencies, developers kind of have to do a lot of different things, and so you would know like marketing and the creative team and sales, they're always going to be kind of making these different requests and having the expectations on the dev team. And if those things go smoothly, then they're the dev team's being okay. And if things aren't going like what sales wants to happen, or the deadlines aren't being met, especially at an agency, like pretty easily if the dev team can't keep up with sales, what they're selling, like as far as estimating the tasks and all that stuff. And so you kind of have to level set between sales and development. Um, it's a little, I guess it's a little easier at an agency to know if you're being productive or not, because
Yeah.
you sell this job and it's like, did I get it done? Did I make money?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're saying, generally speaking, you can gauge if a developer or a development team can is being productive by the satisfaction of other departments with their, work output.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's just, I guess, kind of off the top of my head. I didn't think about that question beforehand.
No, because I mean, because maybe, maybe there might be priorities that are like, or items that are not as important to sales or marketing or whichever department that the dev team sees as important, right? And they tackle those things first. Like, I don't know, like security things, or I don't know, performance is probably something that is noticeable, or would be of importance to marketing or sales. But I don't know. Yes, security comes to mind, maybe technical debt, that type of thing, because they're wondering, well, this change should have taken them, I don't know, a day, but then maybe the team makes a decision and decides, well, we don't want to just add to whatever is going on here. We actually want to fix it, and that one change may take longer than expected, and maybe sales or whoever is looking at the situation from the outside may be dissatisfied, right?
Well, I mean, but I guess, okay. So in the long
just
term,
being, yeah, just being devil's
no,
advocate.
no, you're all good. I think though, uh, keeping technical debt under control, making sure security is always in place, those type of things benefit all departments in the long term. So you're definitely right. Like maybe in the short term, sales didn't get their thing, but you
Yeah,
would think that the request usually doesn't really go right from sales to dev, right? It kind of
yeah,
goes
yeah,
to upper management and then back down. So you would think in that move, when it goes up and then back down, um, in there, kind of the priorities are set, like of, okay, well, they're doing a security thing right now, and you're going to get your Salesforce update after that. And so it's not necessarily like the dev team is telling sales we can't do it yet. It's maybe the CTO or some person who has kind of that is able to kind of push back a little bit. But I would think like it still goes into my theory of like, because sales and creative and everybody is going to be pissed if the site gets hacked, or if the, you're so slow because there's so much technical debt that they don't get their requests. Like you kind of have to keep up on all fronts
yeah,
to
yeah,
make
yeah,
sure overall, things are getting delivered and people are
yeah, yeah.
getting what they want.
No, you're right. I mean, I think over, like, in the long run, or at least that is, I think you're correct in saying that that is one metric that we can look at it, that we can get some insight on this particular, like, topic from, right?
I mean, it's not a great, a super wonderful metric because you could have a super productive development team who, let's say, are bad at communicating, right? And so they would be kicking ass and doing all kinds of things, but the departments would still not like them because they can't get, the proper give and take just as far as communicating and working together.
Yeah, yeah. So what you're alluding to here is that communication plays a big role in productivity, but not only productivity itself, but maybe the perception of productivity, because maybe you are being productive but you're not communicating that we did X, Y, and Z. I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe you're just bad at communicating, or maybe uh you thought communicating security fixes to the sales team wasn't that important, because you think, oh, they're sales, why do they care about security patches? Right.
Yeah,
um
I mean,
so um so yeah, I think communication and saying and laying out, like, okay, in this release or in this sprint, these are the things that were accomplished, and trying to make that clear on why those things are important, or maybe why those things took precedence over something sales may have requested, um, is important. um, and maybe you're right. Someone such as the CTO or another executive should play a role in communicating, what is the agenda, and why X thing can't be done by X deadline, right?
yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes back to like the fundamental idea of like you got to set yourself up to be productive. You got to have the plan in place. As a human being, have your sleep, have your whatever, let's say coffee or exercise
Yeah,
or morning bowl of fruit, whatever it is, and then have your music. Like take care of the human nature parts of it. But then, before you just jump in and start doing stuff, even as a team or as a single developer, communicate. Get your plan in place with the people around you because nobody really just works in a vacuum. You got to make sure you understand the task and that everybody is on board with like these are the priorities and this is what's going to happen and this is how long I think it's going to take. And I'll let you know if it doesn't take that long.
yeah, yeah. No, really solid point there. Communication is key, and it's one of the things that I think newer devs don't necessarily understand, right? Coming When you come into the industry, like, you think to yourself, yeah, and there's this like whole stereotype about IT or software people, or just kind of like in the corner somewhere, just like coding away for hours and hours, and maybe we don't communicate with anyone. It's just like a ticket just falls on your desk, you look at it, you don't say anything to the person, and you just start coding some more, right? and
Yeah.
and then when you get to industry, you realize, wait, communication, soft skills, leadership, all of those things are important. um um and yeah, to touch on that, I think, well, like, you know from your perspective as a tech lead, and then, I mean, my experience as a tech lead, right? The Your leadership plays a big role in how productive you are, right? Because there's the concept of cost versus benefit, right? Maybe there's a task that's like 90% done, but then there's like 10% remaining. And that 10% is a part of the ticket, but it may not be crucial or critical to launching a feature, or hitting the next deadline. And maybe there's a dev that's just like, I don't know, stuck trying to make this thing happen. And if someone above them, their tech lead or manager, just stepped in and said, hey, there's this higher value ticket here, we don't really care about this thing, It's taking a lot longer than we expected. So let's move on to this other ticket, that's actually important, and let's get that one done, and then we can revisit this, or we can bring someone who's actually worked on these type of tickets before or has more experience. Maybe they can get you unblocked, right? Just all these different ways that could be approached. So what do you think about about that particular scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you know, um, you gotta have your priorities, and you gotta know, uh, to a certain degree, like when you're heading for a deadline, like what is the minimum viable product, and can I at least uh, present sort of like, here's where I can be by then, or we could do these other things by then, and kind of give, as a tech lead, give the product owner the options, if you're getting really crunched for time, and kind of work it out, on a communication level. Because I've definitely seen that where the requirements go into a black box, and you're getting close to the deadline, and everybody just freaks out because it's like, well, we're not going to be able to hit these exact things, and you really kind of just need the people that are a little higher up on the team to communicate and decide, like, okay, are we going to push the deadline back? Are we going to decide that we could launch with less features,
Yeah,
um, or what's it going to be here?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's also when you know maybe a project was a bad idea from the onset, right? Maybe there was an off-the-shelf solution that could have been purchased or integrated, and I don't know, maybe the decision maker made that decision that the dev team would handle a thing, but it was a bad um a bad direction to go in the first place.
I think
Or
there's a ton of that in Magento too, a ton, because you can plan things and kind of, or if you don't plan, you can spend months and months doing things that you're kind of like, oh, it's supposed to be like this. That
yeah,
was, or you're supposed to kind of avoid that and do this other way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the point I guess I want to highlight here is you talked about planning, but I want to point out specifically um understanding the requirements, and knowing what all the options are, and making the right choice from the get-go. Because sometimes you you decide to spend so much time on a feature, and then maybe the at the end of the day you misinterpreted what the ask was, or I
Yeah,
don't know,
and
maybe
nobody
it
even
wasn't even as
cares.
you say
Yeah,
what.
and nobody even cares.
Yeah,
You get
nobody
done,
cares.
like, that wasn't what, that was totally not the point. Good job. You know.
They're like, you're like, making this huge announcements, communicate this huge announcement, you're communicating to sales or whoever, and you're like, yeah, we did this thing, and they're like, what? What thing?
No.
Our customers don't want that. Or maybe two
Like, the
months
whole
ago,
point
we
was this other little thing, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, that thing I just didn't even.
ah yeah, that's the over engineering, right? Or adding features that weren't, like, maybe you interpret the requirements different than what they were written, right?
Yeah.
I know when we worked together before, I had worked on something and you was like, wait, this thing is like super convoluted.
Well, but see, you were just following your tech lead's advice on that one, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
fine. I mean, but yeah, I mean, so you can. The thing too about that was that, the thing you actually had created, um, it was complex in ways that I just wasn't familiar with. But
yeah.
but after working with it and looking at what the way it worked for a while, it actually was okay, and it worked within Magento in a way that I just wasn't familiar with. When I looked at what your tech lead had you come up with, I was like, ooh, this isn't the way I would have expected you to do that. But it was okay. It was just okay in a different way.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Now you're saying it's okay, but I think maybe, oh, I don't remember when, but you came back and told me you actually liked it. So, but now it's back to an okay. What
Well, okay.
happened?
So the reason that is because I actually still have in my backlog a ticket to make documentation for that feature. Because
Ah,
every time anybody wants to do anything with it, it's like this big thing. Does anybody know how this works? And it's like, no, not really. So we have to like go back and figure it out again. And then I just still have in my backlog a ticket that says write documentation for that feature. So
well, I
it's
mean,
back to just being okay because nobody can ever figure out.
because documentation is needed. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's great. You just need the documentation, okay?
There you go. Yes.
But again, it wasn't my fault. I was given instructions and I tried to follow those instructions.
It's all good too. The other thing is, I think it was like your first task on the
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
It's fine.
um, but yeah. Any other things that you think could like lead you down a path where um you are either actually unproductive or perceived to be unproductive?
Yeah. So stay organized. Like your folders and stuff on your desktop, like have one main folder, have subfolders inside of that folder with like whatever things, and then there's subfolders inside of those. And as you go, like I would say, per day, sure, make a little mess on your desktop. That's what I do, but it gets cleaned up every day. I organize and I stay focused on whatever I'm doing, but I don't go crazy and just make my desktop into this big mess. Like so that
A
it,
million screenshots.
it's a red flag for me if I see someone with a super messy desktop. It just basically means they got into the groove at some point and just decided, screw it, I'm not going to keep clean. And even your desk, like look around at your desk. Does it look like a mess? Because in that case, you might be disorganized, and it's harder to be productive when there's just clutter everywhere. It takes time though. Like you have to actually slow down to be more productive, which is counterintuitive, right? Like when you're going to save a file, like a Photoshop something, it takes an extra couple minutes to put it in the right spot. But if you just slap it on your desktop and you keep doing that forever, you're gonna get gridlocked at a certain point. So that's a big one is stay organized. I don't know if you want to chime in on that at all.
Well, that actually ties into what you just said about documentation, right?
Yeah.
Right?
And tech debt.
Documentation takes some time,
Yeah.
right? In order for you to write it properly and clearly, and then distribute it and make sure it's stored in a way that it's easy to find. But documentation, good documentation, will lead to um, productivity, right? If you've done a task before, if a single developer has done a task before and they document it well, and maybe it took them 3 hours, they disperse that documentation, or the screenshot that points out a particular issue or whatever it is. That task now takes every other developer, I don't know, 45 minutes, because they can just go through step by step, right? So if you're in a situation where you're just kind of like, I don't know, spending 3 hours on the same task over and over because you refuse to get yourself organized and properly document the steps, you're just like, oh man, I did this last month, um but I
Wait, are
I
you calling me out right now? Is that what's happening? That's
I
exactly.
I did this last month, but and it took me forever, and I didn't take the time to like take the appropriate screenshots or write the steps down or save the Stack Overflow link or the link to the Magento doc that explains why a certain thing works the way it works. Now you're wasting time again when you could have just
Yeah.
copied the snippet of code or whatever it is,
And I
and
think the same thing
been
goes
done
for
with the
tech debt.
task in a second, right?
Yeah, the same thing goes with technical debt. I mean, that one's a little more tricky. Like you can't necessarily, even as a tech lead, uh, always 100% avoid tech debt. You
Yeah,
can though avoid a messy desktop or a messy desk. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
um, and I mean, I will say there's a couple other points I have in here. One of them is kind of around like caffeine and the use of coffee and tea and Red Bull or whatever. Um, I know for me, it's helpful. Like it helps me be productive. Uh, I um, I take a couple months, 40 days off of caffeine per year, and I think that helps me out a lot to not because I know before I do that, usually I'm pretty immune to it, and I might even have a headache for a day, and then that kind of like resets me. Like, man, why am I drinking coffee like this? Is there really a point to it? Do I need it so early? And that kind of allows me to reset. So it's something if you're using caffeine in that way, you might want to consider uh, cutting it out for like a week and see if your whole life crashes down around you or not. Um, could be.
um so yeah, I definitely use I was gonna say stimulants, but that sounds super that sounds a little bit
Well, you're still in your
crazy.
20s, so it's all good, man. If you keep doing the stimulants into your
the,
30s.
the stimulants. But let me see. I had a point that I was gonna make. Okay, yeah. So tools play a big role, right? In how productive you are, right? Which IDE you use.
PHP Storm,
Your
of
the
course.
pardon me.
PHP Storm.
Yes, your familiarity. I think I messed up the pronunciation of that, but anyway, how familiar you are with your tools will impact your productivity. So I take some time, or maybe just your operating system, because sometimes you switch to a different operating system, and I don't know, maybe you're used to Macs, and now you're on Linux, and it's just like, oh, I don't remember all my fancy shortcuts, and now I have to Google how to do everything, which can really slow you down. Or you're in an IDE and you're used to, I don't know, PHP Storm has a really good like version control interface. Um, I don't know, maybe you're used to using Bitbucket where you can do some fancy things and I don't know, merge pull requests or review code quickly. And I don't know, now you're using a new tool like GitLab or something. That it's it I so my point is it's very important to take some time, and this comes back to slowing down, right? Not feeling super rushed that, hey, I need to complete a million tasks, so you don't prioritize getting used to your tools or learning the shortcuts. Maybe, 5 minutes, taking 5 minutes to learn some shortcuts on a new OS, or how a new IDE works, or the fastest way to do a certain thing with a certain tool, that could really hinder your productivity. um, the last thing I wanted to cover in terms of like tools is like, yeah, is your local development environment, right? That burns a lot of time
Oh
if
yeah.
you have a crappy local setup. Maybe it's super slow, or every time you switch branches craziness happens and you have to reset the whole thing, or it breaks and it takes hours to set up.
Yeah,
You
and I
want to
mean, I
touch on
think,
that?
yeah, especially Magento too. Um, you know, I, I for a long time was cranking along just fine with XAMPP or WAMP or MAMP, whatever
It's all the same thing.
thing. And it's like I even had like a pro version where I could switch versions of PHP or whatever. But Magento 2 came along and it has really specific settings for everything, and it's just not even worth messing with, as far as I could tell. As a front end developer, like I was not a server person. So when Magento 2 came along 2 years ago, is that all? I don't know,
No, it's older than that.
3.
The when we This is embarrassing.
I think it's 3 years. I don't
I
think it's
it's not
2.0.
it's I mean I can look it up real quick.
Anyway, yeah, no.
But
So basically, what I'm saying is, you could easily lose a couple of days setting up a local um, project, um, especially if it's an existing project that you need to set up. It's not like
2015, 5 years ago.
what? Okay.
Yeah. Magento 2.0 was released on November 17th, 2015.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But no, nobody was like using.
Just because nobody was using it doesn't mean it wasn't released. but but yeah, your dev environment, even if you can get it up um pretty quickly, um what I've experienced was with Docker, for example, is sometimes your file system gets out of sync. Uh, Often that could cause some issues. Maybe that initial load of the site is really slow,
Yeah.
right? Or, you know, or it's just slow, period. Sometimes the site is slow, sometimes running your commands in the CLI is just takes forever. Maybe you don't have to do that much on the front end.
Oh, you do.
Yeah,
You do.
I mean, but with Grunt, you can avoid running static content deploy, right?
Yeah.
I That's one of the tools I'm embarrassed that I never take the time to set up. I just run set up static content deploy, and maybe that's where my productivity is being affected. But go ahead.
No, no, you're good. I'm happy to show you what's up with that. But actually, we've moved beyond Grunt at this point, and I have a Gulp uh, version that's instant. So used to be you would click save on like a JavaScript or a CSS, and it would be like, okay, Grunt's gonna compile it, compiling. Okay, now I can go refresh. The Gulp version is instant, and it just does it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it even connects with live reload. I can add style lint, so we can lint our stuff right in there. Like it's almost like it's a modern stack. It's pretty awesome.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And this is you're still on a Docker setup, or did
No, we're
you
using
guys
Valet,
go Valet?
but you could do it
Oh
with
nice.
Docker. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, are you guys using some of the documentation I left behind?
For Valet,
Yeah,
yeah, it's there's been a couple of iterations since then. Our new backend tech lead is pretty into documentation. So
yeah.
and also a couple of the backend developers are into documentation. So it's been really nice. Like there's been several rounds
Everyone
of
should
like,
be into documentation.
get into it, man. We should get shirts. Documentation rocks. It's our first piece of merch.
Documentation, document for productivity, document your productivity. Also,
Yeah.
communicate your productivity to
Yeah.
be.
If you plan to fail, you fail to plan. Plan to fail to plan. Something.
No, if you fail to plan,
You plan to
plan
fail.
to fail. Yeah, it
And
makes sense.
okay, so I don't want to touch on one last thing from my side. Um, I think probably for some people, it might not hurt to have some sort of fidgety thing around that can help you to take some of your uh, nervous energy or whatever. So your brain can think while your hands are doing something else, or like just a squeeze ball or something to have around can help focus, and that helps with productivity. And then I did want to say too, if you're not working on a task where it's like, I've done this 100 times, I know what to do. You're solving some problem. Most likely it could be a bug. It might be best to walk away, even take a night and sleep on it, because your brain goes into a different thinking mode where a lot of problems can be solved when you're not actively trying to work on them. So go cook dinner, go for a run would be really good, or sleep and come back to the problem tomorrow. And chances are your brain will have done a lot of work on that problem, and you'll have more creative juices just to bust through the actual problem and get it solved than if you had just kept banging on it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. What I've found many times is that maybe I'm referring to some documentation to do something I haven't done before, and because I've looked at the documentation so much, like it's killing me to like read it slowly. So I'm just reading through it very like quickly, and I continuously miss a very important point, and then just stepping away, relaxing for a bit, and then coming back with a fresh mind and saying, okay, I'm going to examine, I'm going to actually take the time and examine, you know, every aspect of the documentation or every aspect of the problem. And then I notice, oh, there's this silly thing that I've been overlooking, but because I've been trying to rush through the task, or um I've just been looking at it so long that this thing has what's the word uh uh well, I can't remember the word that I'm looking for, but it's evaded me. Yes. So yeah, it's this thing that's right in front of you, but because you're looking so intensely, or maybe you've been working on this problem for so long that it's just like, um, you know, I don't know. Sometimes your phone is in your hand and you're looking for your phone, right?
Yep.
Or maybe I'm just getting old. Like you're on. Have you ever been holding something and you're like, wait, where is it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think with code it's like that too. Sometimes you just have to like kind of relax, come back with a fresh pair of eyes, and and then it just hits you and you're like, wait, okay, this is what I should be doing. And the sky opens up and rainbows, and you're the best developer of in the world that day.
That's right.
But I think unless you have anything to add, maybe this is a good place to.
Yes, let's relax and let's come back to the Magentleman podcast with a fresh pair of eyes next week.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Anyone who's new, like, subscribe,
Yes.
share.
Hit the
Um,
bell.
yeah, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about. Let us know what you thought about this episode, and maybe suggest uh what our next podcast should be about. That'd be cool.
Yeah. And let me know what you think about my background.
Yeah, he's showing off. Cool, cool.
All right. People, say goodbye to Moss.
Peace.